I was once a successful software engineer who met my wife Sarah at a tech conference. Our 5-year marriage seemed perfect to everyone looking in from the outside. I always trusted Sarah despite her increasingly secretive behavior with her close friends. When she suggested an exciting anniversary trip to Mexico, I was thrilled at the chance to reconnect. I never imagined our anniversary celebration would end with me abandoned, drugged, and penniless in a foreign country. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and subscribe to hear more true stories of betrayal and resilience. My life before everything fell apart was what most would consider enviable. I was a rising star at Tech Fusion, one of the most prestigious software companies in San Francisco. At 32, I had already secured a lead developer position with a salary that had comfortably crossed into 6 figures. The promotion had come after 3 years of dedicated work, often stretching into nights and weekends. We had recently purchased a beautiful 3-bedroom home in one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in the city, with panoramic views of the bay that still took my breath away every morning. I was a workaholic. I admit that freely now. I poured everything into my career, believing that professional success would translate to happiness in all areas of my life. I wanted to give Sarah everything she could ever want or need. Looking back, perhaps, that was the first mistake. I met Sarah at a tech conference in Austin 5 years ago. She was representing her marketing firm at a booth across from our company display. From the moment I saw her confidently engaging with attendees, something about her magnetic personality drew me in. During a mixer event that evening, we struck up a conversation that lasted until the venue staff began stacking chairs around us. Sarah was brilliant, beautiful, and had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when she focused her attention on you. She had an impressive background as a marketing executive, having climbed the corporate ladder with remarkable speed. Her insights into consumer psychology fascinated me, so different from my world of code and algorithms. By the end of the weekend conference, we had exchanged numbers and made plans to meet despite living on opposite coasts. Within 3 months, Sarah had secured a transfer to her company branch in San Francisco, and our whirlwind romance accelerated. We were married within a year, which surprised my family and friends who had always known me as cautious and methodical. The first 3 years of our marriage seemed like a dream come true. We traveled to exotic locations that made perfect backdrops for social media posts that friends would comment on with barely disguised envy. Bali, Greece, the Maldives, each trip more luxurious than the last. Our social circle consisted primarily of Sarah friends from her previous workplace, people who moved in circles that felt slightly beyond my comfort zone, but I adapted because it made Sarah happy. Among her friends, 3 were constants in our lives. Jessica, a fellow marketing executive with a sharp tongue and sharper fashion sense. Amanda, a public relations specialist who never seemed to truly relax. And Tara, an event planner whose parties were always the talk of our social circle. They had been friends since college, sharing a history and connection that I could never quite penetrate. When they were together with Sarah, they operated like a single organism with inside jokes and references I could not access. I always felt slightly uncomfortable around them, though I could never pinpoint exactly why. Looking back, there were subtle signs that something was off, red flags, that I willfully ignored in my determination to believe in our perfect marriage. Sarah began having unexplained absences, times when she would be unreachable for hours. When questioned, her explanations always seemed plausible, but vague. Extended client meetings, phone battery died, poor reception. Our joint credit card would show charges at restaurants or shops on days when she had supposedly been working late. Sometimes I would walk into a room where Sarah was with her friends, and their conversation would abruptly shift, followed by exchanged glances. I pretended not to notice. Once I overheard Jessica say to Sarah, "Does he suspect anything?" before they noticed my approach, and quickly changed the subject to vacation plans. As our 5th anniversary approached, Sarah surprised me by taking charge of planning a celebration trip to Cancun, Mexico. This was unusual since I typically handled our travel arrangements due to my meticulous nature and reward point strategies. Even more surprising was her insistence that her 3 closest friends and their partners join us for part of the trip. "It will be so much more fun with everyone there," she enthused. "We can have some alone time for the first couple of days, and then everyone will fly in for a big celebration." Something about the arrangement made me uneasy, but I dismissed my concerns as paranoia. After all, this was our anniversary, and Sarah seemed genuinely excited about the plans. She had booked an expensive resort with private beach access and arranged for various excursions throughout our stay. What struck me as odd was her specific request that I bring all my credit cards and extra cash. "You never know what opportunities might come up in Mexico," she said with a smile that in hindsight did not reach her eyes. "We might find something special we want to buy or decide to extend our stay." I agreed, never suspecting that this decision would lead to the most devastating experience of my life. The first 2 days in Cancun were everything I could have hoped for. We enjoyed romantic dinners on the beach, watched breathtaking sunsets from our balcony, and reconnected in ways that made me feel guilty, forever doubting Sarah's commitment to our marriage. She was attentive, affectionate, and seemingly present in a way she had not been for months. We took selfies with genuine smiles, made love with an intensity that had been missing, and talked about plans for our future together. "I think we should consider starting a family soon," Sarah said one night as we walked along the shoreline. The statement caught me by surprise given her previous ambivalence about having children. "Really, that would be amazing," I replied, feeling a surge of hope for our future. She squeezed my hand and leaned her head against my shoulder. "I think it is time for a new chapter in our lives." I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, though not in the way I imagined. The dynamic shifted noticeably with the arrival of Jessica, Amanda, and Tara along with their partners. What had been an intimate celebration suddenly became a boisterous group vacation. The serene meals were replaced by loud dinners with excessive drinking. Private beach walks transformed into group excursions, where I often found myself walking several paces behind, excluded from conversations. The partners of Sarah's friends were men I had met only a few times before: Jessica husband Mark, a corporate lawyer; Amanda boyfriend, Paul, a real estate developer; and Tara husband Derek, who managed a hedge fund. They were perfectly cordial to me, but there was an undercurrent of something I could not identify. Occasionally I would catch one of them looking at me with what seemed like pity. During a poolside gathering I went to get drinks for Sarah and myself. Upon returning, I overheard a fragment of conversation that made me freeze just out of their line of sight. "Everything is set for tomorrow night," Tara was saying in a hushed tone. "The driver knows exactly where to go. Are you sure he will not cause problems?" This came from Jessica, her voice tense. "Trust me," Sarah replied, with a confidence that chilled me. "Once the sedative kicks in, he will not remember anything. We will have at least 12 hours. They laughed, then a sound that raised goosebumps on my arms despite the tropical heat. When I made my presence known, the conversation immediately shifted to discussing which beach club to visit the next day. I told myself they must have been planning a surprise for me, perhaps an excursion they wanted to keep secret. The alternative was too troubling to consider. The third night of our trip, Sarah announced she had arranged a special celebration dinner at an exclusive restaurant situated on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Everyone dressed formally for the occasion, and I remember feeling proud to have Sarah on my arm as we entered the candlelit venue. The meal was exquisite, featuring local seafood and regional specialties I had never tried before. About halfway through the evening, Sarah presented me with a vivid blue cocktail that was not on the menu. "The bartender made this especially for you," she said, her eyes gleaming with an intensity I mistook for romance. "It is their signature anniversary drink. They only make it for special occasions." The cocktail had an unusual taste, slightly bitter beneath the sweetness, but I drank it to please Sarah. Within 20 minutes, I began to feel strangely disoriented. The room seemed to tilt at odd angles. Conversations around me became distorted, and I found it increasingly difficult to focus. I remember trying to stand only to grip the table for support as the room spun around me. "I think I need some air," I managed to say, my words slurring slightly. "We will get you back to the hotel," Sarah replied, but there was something off about her tone. Was that amusement I detected? My memories of what followed come in disjointed fragments, being helped into a vehicle that was not our rental car. Sarah and her friends laughing about something I could not comprehend. Unfamiliar streets passing by the window. Someone saying, "He is completely out of it now." And finally Sarah's voice crystal clear in my fading consciousness. "Survive this genius. Maybe now you will learn not everything is about your precious career." The last image burned into my memory before darkness claimed me was Sarah and her friends laughing as my vision blurred and consciousness slipped away. I awoke with a pounding headache in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through thin curtains, illuminating peeling paint and water stains on the ceiling. This was definitely not our luxury resort. As awareness gradually returned, I realized I was lying on a hard mattress in what appeared to be a cheap motel room. The air conditioner rattled ineffectively against the oppressive heat and distant traffic sounds filtered through the thin walls. When I tried to sit up, a wave of nausea forced me back down. My mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and my thoughts were frustratingly sluggish. It took several minutes of concentrated effort to swing my legs over the side of the bed and take in my surroundings more fully. The room was small and Spartan: a single bed, a wobbly table with a plastic chair, and a door that presumably led to a bathroom. My suitcase was nowhere to be seen. With rising panic, I patted my pockets, finding them empty. My wallet, phone, passport, even my wedding ring were gone. The only items in the room that seemed to belong to me were the clothes I was wearing now, wrinkled and stained. On the table lay a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a note written in Sarah, familiar handwriting. "Survive this genius. Maybe now you will learn not everything is about your precious career. Consider this a lesson in priorities." The note slipped from my fingers as the full reality of my situation crashed over me. My wife had drugged me, robbed me, and abandoned me in what I would later learn was a rundown motel on the outskirts of Cancun, miles from our resort and any tourist areas. A thorough search of my pockets yielded only a $20 bill and a room key with the number 16 scratched into the plastic. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror. The man looking back at me was a stranger, pale, disheveled, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. How could this be happening? What had I done to deserve such betrayal? With no phone and no money, I made my way to the motel lobby, a small room with a desk behind which sat a bored-looking man watching a soccer game on a tiny television. My attempts to explain my situation were met with indifference, complicated by my limited Spanish and his limited English. "Phone?" I asked desperately. "Computer, internet." After some negotiation, and the $20 I had found in my pocket, the man allowed me to use an ancient desktop computer in the back office. With shaking hands, I logged into my email, then my bank accounts, only to discover horrors that made my physical condition seem trivial by comparison. My checking account had been completely drained. My savings account showed a balance of $17.36, down from the nearly $50,000 that had been there the day before. My credit cards had all been maxed out with cash advances and purchases in various locations across Mexico, totaling over $50,000 in charges. In less than 24 hours, I had gone from financially secure to completely destitute. In a daze, I navigated to Sarah's Instagram account, only to find a photo posted 6 hours earlier showing her and her friends boarding a private yacht. The caption read, "Freedom at last. Best girls trip ever number. New beginnings number. Freedom at last." They were clearly no longer in Cancun, having moved on to another location while I lay unconscious. The reality of my situation became even more dire when I returned to the front desk and tried to explain that I could not pay for another night at the motel. The manager's expression shifted from indifference to suspicion to contempt. He made it clear through gestures and broken English that I needed to vacate the room immediately. With nowhere to go, no money, no identification, and no way to communicate with anyone. Back home, I found myself sitting on a curb outside the motel, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The first 48 hours of my new reality were a blur of desperation and humiliation. I walked for hours, trying to find the tourist zone or police station, eventually locating a police outpost, where I attempted to report what had happened. The officers were skeptical at best, their expressions, suggesting they had seen plenty of American tourists who partied too hard and concocted stories to explain away their irresponsibility. Without a passport or any identification, I was just another gringo with a tale of woe. That night, when I could walk no further, I found a relatively secluded spot on the beach and tried to sleep on the sand using my arm as a pillow. The temperature dropped unexpectedly, and I shivered through the night, drifting in and out of restless sleep while trying to comprehend how my life had imploded so completely. The next day, hunger drove me to swallow my pride. I spent hours outside a small local restaurant, eventually offering to sweep the patio and take out trash in exchange for leftover food. The owner reluctantly agreed, watching me suspiciously as I completed the tasks with as much dignity as I could muster. The The beans, rice, and tortillas I received were perhaps the most humbling meal of my life, eaten quickly in the alley behind the restaurant. I had gone from leading a development team at a prestigious tech company to begging for food within the span of 3 days. The cruel efficiency of Sarah betrayal was becoming clearer in a foreign country without identification or resources. I was effectively trapped and helpless, exactly as she had planned. My unexpected salvation came on the fourth day. Exhausted, sunburned, and increasingly desperate, I had taken to wandering the areas between tourist zones and local neighborhoods, looking for opportunities to earn money or find help. I stumbled upon a small cafe, tucked away on a side street, its bright blue exterior and hand-painted signs standing out against the weathered buildings surrounding it. The owner, Miguel, was wiping down outdoor tables when he noticed me lingering nearby. Something about my appearance must have told him I was in trouble, not just another tourist. "You look like you could use some coffee and food," he said in accented but clear English, gesturing to an empty table. "Sit. No charge." I was too exhausted and hungry to refuse. The simple breakfast of coffee, eggs, and beans he brought out might as well have been a gourmet meal. When I tried to explain my situation, expecting the now familiar looks of disbelief, I was surprised by his thoughtful nod. "Unfortunately, this happens more than you would think," Miguel said. "Maybe not exactly like your story, but tourists stranded, robbed, abandoned. The police here, they do not care much unless you are wealthy or connected." When I finished eating, instead of asking me to leave, Miguel made an unexpected offer. "My dishwasher quit yesterday. I cannot pay much, but I can offer meals a small salary. And there is a storage room upstairs where you could sleep until you figure things out." That offer changed everything. The storage room was little more than a closet with a folding cot, but it was secure and private. The work was grueling my soft programmer hands, not accustomed to the hot water and caustic soap, but each blister felt like a small step toward regaining control of my life. Within 2 weeks, I had saved enough from my modest wages to buy a prepaid phone with limited minutes. My first call was to the American consulate in Merida, the closest diplomatic presence. The consular officer was sympathetic, but limited in what she could offer. "We can help you get a temporary passport for repatriation purposes," she explained. "But you would still need to make your own way to our office and pay the fees. We cannot provide financial assistance except in extreme life or death situations." When I explained my complete lack of funds and identification, she suggested I contact family or friends who might wire money. The humiliation of that moment was profound. I had no family close enough to ask for that kind of help, and most of my friends had been mutual connections with Sarah people who might already be hearing her version of events. "Let me think about my options," I told the officer, unwilling to admit the full extent of my isolation. That night, as I lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, a realization struck me. I had been approaching this entire ordeal from a position of weakness and victimhood. What if instead I viewed it as an opportunity to rebuild on my own terms? I still had my most valuable assets, my mind, my technical knowledge, and now a safe place to regroup. The next day, I approached Miguel with a proposition. "I noticed your cafe does not have a website or any online presence. If you let me use the computer in your office during off hours, I could build you a website that would attract more tourists. No charge, just in exchange for continued use of the computer." Miguel was intrigued enough to agree. Using my limited programming tools and free website services, I created a simple but effective site for Café Azul, complete with menu translations, photos, and location information, targeting English-speaking tourists. Within 3 weeks, Miguel noticed an uptick in American and Canadian customers, many mentioning they had found the cafe online. Encouraged by this success, I began offering similar services to neighboring businesses. A small hotel needed an online booking system. A souvenir shop wanted a catalog website. A tour operator needed help organizing his customer database. Word spread, and soon I had enough small projects to begin saving money more aggressively. With my improving Spanish and growing local connections, I found a tiny studio apartment to rent at a fraction of tourist prices. It was basic, just a room with a hot plate mini fridge and bathroom, but it was mine earned through my own ingenuity rather than handed to me. As my situation stabilized, I made a strategic decision that would shape the next phase of my life. I would not immediately return to the United States. Not out of fear or inability, but because I recognized that Sarah and her friends had committed serious crimes that would have consequences once I reappeared. If I returned immediately, they might be prepared with counter-narratives or might even flee. By remaining missing for a while longer, I could build resources and plan my response carefully. This decision brought an unexpected sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely disconnected from my former identity. No social media pressure, no career ladder to climb, no marriage to maintain. I was learning who Carlos truly was when everything external was stripped away. The 6 months that followed transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. My side business, creating websites and technical solutions for local businesses, grew steadily. Instead of one client a week, I was taking on 3 or 4, charging fair but profitable rates. I opened a local bank account under my name, with my temporary consular document gradually building a financial cushion. I developed deep friendships within the community, people who knew nothing about my previous life or status. Miguel became like a brother, introducing me to his family and including me in weekend gatherings. I met artists, musicians, and entrepreneurs who showed me a different way of measuring success than the metrics I had previously valued. Physically, I changed as well. Daily swims in the ocean and walks along the beach replaced my former gym routine. The local diet of fresh fish, fruits, and vegetables, combined with significantly less stress, resulted in me dropping 15 pounds and gaining a healthy tan. I grew a short beard, let my formerly precise haircut grow out into a more relaxed style, and adopted the casual linen shirts and pants common among locals. The mental clarity that came from distance and perspective was perhaps the most valuable change. With each passing week, I could see more clearly how unhealthy my marriage had been from the beginning. Sarah had never truly partnered with me. She had curated my performance as a husband the way she would manage a marketing campaign. The signs had always been there, but I had been too invested in the illusion to recognize them. Around the 4-month mark, I felt secure enough to use my technical skills to discreetly investigate what had happened after my abandonment. Using a VPN and anonymous browsing, I accessed my old email accounts and social media profiles. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions and revealed new depths to the betrayal. Sarah and her friends had not acted on impulse. I found emails dating back 14 months, discussing their exit strategy for Sarah. They had been methodically planning this for over a year, calculating the best time and place to abandon me while maximizing their financial gain. Mexico had been chosen specifically because they believed it would be difficult for me to navigate without money or identification. More disturbing were the casual discussions about dividing my assets. Jessica had apparently helped Sarah set up hidden accounts where she had been siphoning money from our joint finances for months before the trip. Amanda had researched how long it would take for someone to be declared legally dead in absentia. Tara had connections to sell my car and other valuables quickly once they returned. The most painful discovery was evidence that Sarah had been having an affair with Jessica's brother for at least 2 years. Their messages made it clear that he was waiting for her to get free so they could be together openly. The marriage I had been fighting to preserve had been a sham for much longer than I had realized. These discoveries, rather than destroying me, strengthened my resolve. I now had digital evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and theft. I downloaded and secured everything, consulting discreetly with a Mexican attorney about international law and my rights as a victim. With each piece of evidence cataloged and each legal option explored, I felt more prepared to return on my terms. By the 6-month mark, I had rebuilt enough savings to fund my return, secured all necessary evidence, and created a detailed plan for seeking justice without descending into mere revenge. I was no longer the desperate man abandoned in a foreign motel. I was someone stronger, clearer, and more determined than I had ever been before. My return to the United States was methodically planned, beginning with a direct flight to Chicago rather than San Francisco, to avoid any chance of early detection. I had notified specific authorities of my return, but had not yet contacted anyone from my previous social circle. The temporary passport I had finally obtained from the consulate, along with my modest savings, allowed me to rent a small apartment and begin the process of rebuilding my legal identity. The first 72 hours were dedicated to establishing the foundation for what would follow. I filed detailed police reports documenting the drugging, theft, and abandonment. I provided copies of all digital evidence I had gathered, including the emails discussing the conspiracy and the social media posts that helped establish a timeline. I contacted the fraud departments of all my credit card companies, with evidence that the charges had been made while I was incapacitated. I secured a skilled attorney specialized in international fraud cases, using most of my savings to pay the retainer. With the legal groundwork laid, I took aim at the professional lives Sarah and her friends had continued to enjoy in my absence. I sent a detailed package of evidence to the Human Resources Department and legal counsel at Sarah marketing firm, documenting how she had used company resources to plan and execute what amounted to a criminal conspiracy. Similar packages went to the employers of Jessica, Amanda, and Tara, along with evidence of their specific involvement. The responses were swift. Within days, I received calls from corporate attorneys seeking to understand their company's potential liability. Sarah firm placed her on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Jessica company terminated her employment outright, unwilling to risk association with such behavior. The wheels of consequences were turning faster than I had anticipated. What I had not planned, however, was the coincidental encounter that occurred 6 months and 2 weeks after my abandonment. I had traveled to San Francisco to meet with investigators and retrieve what personal items remained in a storage unit I had maintained. While dining alone at a restaurant in the financial district, I looked up to see Sarah entering with Jessica and Tara laughing and dressed for what appeared to be a celebration lunch. Our eyes met across the restaurant. I watched as recognition dawned on their faces, followed by shock, and then unmistakable fear. Sarah reached for her phone, her hand shaking visibly. I knew she was checking for messages, perhaps warnings from attorneys or police that I had returned. What she found instead were the 121 missed calls I had documented, attempting to reach her during those first desperate weeks, calls that had gone to a number she had apparently abandoned soon after leaving me. I could have confronted them. I could have caused a scene that would have satisfied some primal need for public vindication. Instead, I simply stood straight in the jacket of my new suit and walked calmly to their table. "The authorities will be contacting you," I said quietly, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Before they could respond, I placed my payment on my table and walked out feeling a weight lift from my shoulders with each step. The legal consequences unfolded more satisfyingly than any confrontation could have provided. Sarah, Jessica, Amanda, and Tara were arrested within the week, facing multiple felony fraud charges across state and international jurisdictions. Their partners, while not directly involved in my abandonment, were implicated in the financial crimes that followed. The case made local news, their mugshots appearing in articles detailing the elaborate scheme. Ultimately facing overwhelming evidence, they accepted plea deals requiring full restitution of all stolen funds, substantial community service and probation terms that severely restricted their movement and financial activities. Sarah lost her executive position and professional reputation. The carefully curated social media profiles that had once showcased their perfect lives now stood abandoned artifacts of a facade that had crumbled under scrutiny. But the true victory was not in their punishment. It came in my rebuilding of a life that was authentically mine. I declined to return to my former company, despite their offer to reinstate me with back pay. Instead, I relocated to Seattle, a city where I knew no one and had no history. There, I started a cybersecurity consulting business focused specifically on helping individuals and small businesses protect themselves from fraud and identity theft. I used my experience to create educational resources for other victims, speaking occasionally at conferences about the intersection of personal security and technology. Through this work, I met others who had faced betrayal and found strength in their recovery, forming connections based on genuine understanding rather than superficial compatibility. 18 months after my return to the United States, I met Elise, an attorney who specialized in consumer protection. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than the whirlwind intensity that had characterized my beginning with Sarah. Elise appreciated my story, not as a dramatic narrative, but as evidence of resilience. We moved in together after a year, approaching partnership with thoughtful intention rather than socially prescribed timelines. Perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the small nonprofit I founded, which provided emergency assistance to Americans stranded abroad. Working with consulates and embassies, we created emergency funds and local contact networks that could offer immediate help to those who found themselves in situations similar to mine. Each person we helped reinforced my belief that even the darkest experiences could be transformed into something meaningful. the lessons I learned through this painful journey continue to shape my daily choices. I discovered that losing everything revealed what truly mattered. Material possessions, professional titles, and social status had dominated my priorities for so long that I had lost sight of more fundamental values: genuine connection, personal integrity, and the quiet confidence that comes from facing adversity directly. Hardship, I learned, reveals character in ways comfort never can. The version of myself that emerged from those months in Mexico was more authentic and aligned with my true values than the man who had chased external validation through career advancement and a picture-perfect marriage. I found that genuine connections with people who know and accept your full story are infinitely more valuable than a wide social network based on appearances. The friends I have now are fewer but deeper relationships built on mutual support rather than shared activities or status markers. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that gratitude can exist alongside pain. I would never have chosen the betrayal that upended my life, but I can honestly say I am grateful for the growth it ultimately enabled. There is a profound peace that comes from choosing to build something new rather than dwelling in resentment over what was lost. If you have ever experienced betrayal or found yourself starting over in unexpected circumstances, I would love to hear your story in the comments below. What strength did you discover in yourself when faced with adversity? What lessons would you share with others walking a similar path? Please subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and transformation, and hit the like button if this journey resonated with you. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength during difficult times. Thank you for being part of this community where we can transform our painful experiences into wisdom that might help others. Remember, it is not what happens to us that defines us, but how we choose to rebuild.